To be self-aware is both a blessing and a curse. Most people move through life blindly. They chase after distractions, numb themselves with routine, and never question who they are. But Fernando Pessoa, he couldn't escape himself. He saw too deeply into the human condition, and for him, self-awareness was not liberation. It was a burden. Today, we'll dive into the paradox of consciousness through Pessoa's haunting philosophy. We'll explore why too much awareness can isolate us, why it can fracture our identity, and how Pessoa lived, perhaps suffered, as one of the most self-aware minds in history. This is the burden of self-awareness. Fernando Pessoa was not just a poet. He was a man who contained multitudes. Born in Lisbon in 1888, Pessoa lived an ordinary life on the surface. By day, he worked as a translator. By night, he wrote. But inside, he was anything but ordinary. Pessoa invented heteronyms, dozens of alternative personalities, each with its own worldview, style, and philosophy. To write, for him, was not self-expression. It was self-fracturing. Each heteronym was a piece of his fragmented consciousness. For Pessoa, the self was never one. It was a crowd, a chaos, and his philosophy of self-awareness began with this recognition. The more we look inward, the less stable the idea of I becomes. Self-awareness is supposed to be a gift. The Greeks carved "Know thyself" above the temple of Apollo. Philosophers for centuries praised the examined life. But Pessoa saw something different. He realized that when we know ourselves too deeply, we begin to unravel. We start to see every contradiction, every hidden desire, every illusion that makes life bearable. Pessoa once wrote, "To know oneself is to err, to be mistaken about oneself. To not know oneself is to live." Here lies the paradox. Without self-awareness, we live unconsciously, like sleepwalkers. With too much self-awareness, we become paralyzed, unable to act, suffocated by reflection. Pessoa lived in this tension. His mind was a theater of selves, each aware of the others. And in that awareness, he carried both brilliance and unbearable weight. We often think self-awareness leads to authenticity, that if we just dig deep enough, we'll find our true self. But Pessoa dismantled this illusion. For him, there is no true self, only masks, voices, fragments. Identity itself is a construction, a performance we give to the world and to ourselves. The burden of self-awareness, then, is realizing there is no core, no solid I to cling to, just an endless hall of mirrors. And if you've ever stayed awake at night, questioning who you really are, you've tasted a fraction of Pessoa's torment. Most people find comfort in simple illusions: love, work, ambition, belief. But Pessoa's awareness stripped these comforts away. He often wrote of feeling like a stranger to life itself, watching from the outside, unable to participate. He once said, I feel as if I am always on the verge of waking up, but never do. This is the loneliness of consciousness, to see too clearly, to recognize the absurdity of existence, and yet to be unable to unsee. Pessoa lived in crowds, in cafes, surrounded by people, yet he was alone. Not because others abandoned him, but because his awareness placed him on a different plane of existence. He was present, but not part of the world. And yet, out of this burden came beauty. Pessoa's poetry is haunting, precisely because it emerges from this depth of awareness. His heteronyms gave voice to the many selves inside him. Through them, he found temporary release. For Pessoa, writing was not just art, it was survival. It was the only way to bear the unbearable. Creativity became his form of escape, a way of transforming torment into meaning. And this is perhaps the lesson for us, that even in the burden of self-awareness, there is potential. Pain can produce art. Reflection can create wisdom. So what do we learn from Pessoa? That self-awareness is double-edged. Too little and we drift unconsciously. Too much and we collapse under the weight of our own mind. The burden of self-awareness is real, but it is also a reminder that the mind is vast, that identity is not fixed, that perhaps we are not meant to fully know ourselves, but to live within the mystery. Pessoa never solved this paradox. He lived it, and maybe so do we. Fernando Pessoa once wrote, "To know oneself is to cease to feel." In those words lies both despair and truth. The burden of self-awareness is heavy, but perhaps in carrying it, we glimpse a depth of existence few ever see. And that, too, is a kind of strange beauty.